Hello, poetry lovers! Tonight's video shows the creation of a new piece tentatively titled Remedy. Stick around to the end of the video to see the complete first draft of this poem. The inspiration for this piece arose from an actual experience, as many of my poems do. It took me a while to get started at first. I knew what the poem needed to say overall, but I really struggled with how to begin saying it, so there's a long delay here at the beginning. To give a glimpse into what's happening mentally here, I'm considering, rejecting, revising, and reworking possible opening lines as rapidly as I can, trying to determine how much I need to say, how long I want the sentences and lines to be, how much detail to give. I probably went through 15 possible opening sentences before I settled on the 2 I ended up writing. But once I got going, I wrote fairly quickly, since I had a pretty good idea where I wanted to go with this one before I sat down and began writing. And this is a theme you'll probably hear over and over again on my channel. A lot of the work of writing is done for me before I sit down at my desk and grab my pen. For this one, I had a surprising experience that seemed like the seed of an idea, but I wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I just kind of mentally buried it, like you do with seeds, until a few weeks later when I had a similar experience. And then it seemed like the idea was ready to begin sprouting. So I started thinking about it more and more, turning it around in my mind and kind of unpacking it, testing out the facets of this idea to see which ones were most interesting and which were going to be duds. And it was during the last stage of this thinking process, the evening before I sat down to write this poem, that I landed on the structure that I chose. I realized that I wanted the poem to have a chiastic structure. Chiasm refers to a poetic structure that is common in ancient Hebrew poetry, such as the Psalms, but its name comes from the Greek letter chi, which is shaped like an X. To try to explain this structure, it introduces a variety of ideas in a certain order, then, at the middle point, turns around and begins revisiting each idea in reverse order. It's as though a mirror is held up to the first half of the poem. But of course, great chiasm doesn't just repeat ideas, it reimagines them, so that the reflection of each idea introduces new content or new insights that make the idea fresh and surprising. In the English language, George Herbert's Easter Wings is perhaps the best example of this. The poem has thematic chiasm and also has stanza structure that gives a visual representation to the thematic structure. I've included a link to that poem and some more info about chiasm in the description. Because I had started out with that structure in mind, the arrangement of the poem was easy to attack. I chose to do sestets, that is, stanzas with 6 lines each, to add another layer of repetition, since I was planning 6 stanzas. I also strove to make lines of approximately the same length, since I wanted each stanza to look visually similar to the others. But in the first 3 stanzas, I had a lot of difficulty with wording, and I really struggled with figuring out exactly how I wanted to express each idea. That uncertainty about wording eased up as I went along, and by the last stanzas, the writing was coming more smoothly. I hadn't sat down to write with a last line already in mind, but I knew the poem was working toward that concept, and so the final words were easier to come by than they sometimes are. As I compare the wording in some places with others, I think this poem will really benefit from revising some of the word choice, the level of detail, and perhaps the lineation. But for me, a lot of the work of developing and structuring this poem was done before sitting down to write. I've often heard and read that good writers will throw away a huge percentage of what they write. Maybe I'm just too arrogant, but that's not my experience. Instead, I think I do a lot of my throwing away before I ever commit words to the page, as I did at the beginning of this piece, considering and rejecting at least a dozen alternatives to the sentences I finally put in ink. I know this poem can get stronger with more refining, but I'm excited about the piece I ended up with. So here it is, a first draft of something I'm tentatively calling Remedy, although I'm not crazy about that title and I might change it. Written in about 34 minutes on March 6th, 2022. Remedy. I hurt my shoulder. I was young, maybe 20, and the hurt hardly noticed, until when winter came, the shoulder ached at each storm's advent, aging 50 years too soon. Over a decade, I felt every forecast in my injured joint. We got a puppy, cute as all are, yet for a year I called him It, not his name, and pushed away his young, warm mass each time he sought affection. I felt, not thought, how dare he live when my old pup had died. I lost 3 children, and I hated my own flesh for failing them. Each loss later, harder than the last, until I conceived a 4th time, lived 10 long months in breathless terror, and even when I held my living daughter trembling, seared by fear. But just last week, I laid her breathing body sleeping, slipped away, and read half of Human Chain before I thought to turn the monitor on. And when she slept all night, so did I. In peace, I woke at dawn to bird song and a quiet mind. That day, I paused folding laundry to pet Shadow's sleek head, scratch his ears, rub his trusting upturned belly, to accept him. All that I commanded he obeyed, and when he laid his chin on my knee, he met my gentle palm on his crown, affirming, "Mine." Today I woke to a cold wind that scattered sleet thick on oak branches, coating each brown blade of grass in spring ice, and I was shocked. How long since my body hurt for changing earth? Oh God, only you know how suddenly, how secretly we heal. Thanks for watching this episode of Ars Poetica. If you enjoyed watching poetry happen, please like and subscribe. Then go make some art.